Hello, my name is Ian Watson, and I'm the Director Emeritus of the American Membrane Technology Association, known fondly to some of us as AMTA. AMTA is a technical organization that advocates the use of membrane technology for water treatment, ranging from wastewater reclamation and reuse to seawater desalination and membrane filtration. The heart of the technology is the membrane and the systems that are assembled around it to produce the final unit operation. And about 3 years ago, the board of directors of AMTA decided that we should record the history of the technology through the eyes of the pioneers who blazed the trail. This is a continuation of our series, Chats with the Pioneers, in which we are recording for posterity, or possibly longer, the efforts of the early pioneers in bringing membrane technology into the mainstream of water treatment. AMTA is posting these interviews on its website in the members-only section, so that the next generations of engineers and scientists, and those of us that enjoy reminiscing about the good old days, can look at and listen to many of the people who were instrumental in bringing this technology to the worldwide position that it has today, providing safe, reliable drinking water to those in need. This series of 3 chats is with past employees of Polymetrics, one of the legacy OEMs in the business, and this is interview number 29. I have with me today Bill Andrews, Bob Wright, and David Laker, 3 people instrumental in the success of Polymetrics. And Bill, I'd like to start with you, if you could give us a little bit about your educational and work background.
I was born in Bermuda, and then I went to England University, where I got a bachelor's in physics and a doctorate in atomic physics from Oxford University, where I attended as a Rhodes Scholar. I then went back to Bermuda and became the operations manager of a series of electrodialysis plants. That was in 1972. In 1975, I ran into David here, who was putting in the world's first commercial seawater RO plant, and I was sold. So I joined Polymetrics in 75 and came out to California, and I was there until 1988, where I was R&D manager, VP marketing and sales, and general manager of various divisions. 88, I left and went to Boston to Reliable Water Company, which was a startup in reverse osmosis and artificial intelligence, where I was president. And in 91, I went back home to Bermuda and formed DeSalco, which designed, manufactured, financed, built, and operated seawater reverse osmosis plants in the Caribbean. That company was sold in 2003, but I retained the work exchanger, energy recovery technology, and formed a company called Dwyer Technology, and installed some of the world's largest plants with work exchangers in conjunction with Calder, a Pelton turbine company. And all that technology and Calder were sold in 2009. And that's the end of my story.
Thanks, Bill. Bob, how about you?
I started out in Glasgow, Scotland. I moved to Bermuda. I'm a refrigeration air conditioning engineer. I finished up as a plant manager at one of the companies in Bermuda. That's where I came in contact with these 2 gentlemen, and I was involved with the first RO unit, as we use a tremendous amount of water in airline catering. And the first one we had, after 5 years, the only thing that was left was the frame. So it was an ongoing experience of everything that worked in theory but didn't work in practice. But the outcome was fine. That the final one worked very well. And then I moved to California and I worked for Polymetrics. I travelled, field service, installations, went to Aqua Design and did the same thing and more electrical work. And then to Ionics, and now I'm a gentleman of leisure. I do as little as possible in the longest period of time.
David?
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. I started in Santa Barbara in 1969 for a company called Ajax International. And my mentor there was Blair Gibbons, who had just escaped Gulf General Atomic. He's credited as being the person to roll the first successful spiral. He got financing from M. Franz Breitling, who was selling, actually he sold ice machines to Eskimos. Anyways, spent 2 years there. I figured I knew everything there was to know about RO, and so through some sort of miracle of science, obtained a license from DuPont to use their brand new released membrane, the B9. It was a hollow fine fiber in an aluminum shell that was rated at 2,000 gallons a day. And on the basis of that, I started what was known as Lake International. It operated for 30 months exactly until I was snowed under with, we were just discussing, too much exposure. And I sold out, actually it was a marriage to Polymetrics that was arranged by DuPont themselves with a very small dowry. And so it became a Poly. I spent 4 years with Poly, and during that time, I think it was 74 I met Bill and Bob, wasn't it? Yeah. Putting in, Bob actually did the installation. I came down to do the commissioning, and during that time, I think Bill could smell the water from a mile away. So that's where we met. Bill was, he had RO fever from the very first drop, and came out to Polymetrics just about the time that I moved to Bahrain to establish a field office for Poly. And let me see, went to 77, and then moved to one of Poly's outlets, if you will, in Singapore. Again, some of the very first seawater ROs, and using Bill's design at that time. Do you remember we put a Dow hollow fiber on one of them? Most people don't.
Jardine.
Pardon?
Jardine offshore, yeah.
Yeah, Jardine.
Yeah.
I can still see the pressure gauge going down the deck and into the water. But anyway, that was a Dow hollow fiber membrane that on South China seawater, about 34,000 ppm, produced 80 ppm permeate. And it was obviously a pretty good membrane. DuPont took them to task over the fact that they used a plate instead of DuPont's, actually a carborundum grinding wheel up front. Dow used a piece of sintered bronze. And DuPont said that it was infringing on their patent, and Dow, apparently they have this arrangement where if one says you're infringing, the other one says okay, and they quit. And so they were suddenly out of the hollow fiber business, just like they were in, which is a shame, really, because it was probably the best membrane at its time, and we're back to DuPont's. I've been in it ever since. I'm still in it. I'm currently just been posted to Beijing. Happy days. And I still work. I work for Aqualing, Lyng.
Good. Thank you, David. Thank you. We heard a little bit at the previous group yesterday with about the early days of Polymetrics and some of the stories and some of the characters that were involved. So, you have any stories you'd like to share with us, Bill, about the early days and some of the mistakes you made and how you corrected them and that kind of stuff?
You'll probably cut this one, but we used to have the clients would come to our factory on Corvin Drive, and we'd take them out back and smoke pot at lunchtime. always work, but sometimes it did.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was just as natural as anything, wasn't it?
Yeah.
During the breaks, out the back.
And our president wore a shark's tooth necklace. It was really quite a hippie company. That's just one that I recall.
But the ladies did drink sodas. They didn't smoke.
Ah, okay. Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
We had a lot of changes in Polymetrics. Probably the best opportunity I had was when the president and the VP marketing sort of left the company and took a customer with them, and so all of a sudden I went from being a lowly manager of R&D to being vice president of marketing and sales, and didn't have a clue what I was meant to be doing. But that was when we were really pushing the seawater systems, and of course I'd been heavily involved in those.
What year was that?
That was 77. Yeah. So I was quite young and I got this huge promotion. It was wonderful.
I think that's actually shortly thereafter was when I first met you, when we were taking bids on the original Sanibel RO project.
Yeah.
And Polymetrics was one of the bidders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a long time ago.
And I bid one of them. I bid, I think it was Cape Coral or something. I bid Dow.
That's
and of course,
right.
we were a DuPont licensee. They were extremely upset.
Yeah.
But we didn't get the job anyway.
Yeah. Bob, you were out in the field
Yeah,
a lot of the time, and probably saying.
Well, they gave me 6 months in the factory, and then they said it was time to go. So I was shuttling backwards and forwards. Mostly at that time, it was all in the Caribbean. It was quite interesting. But the first job, they sent me back to Bermuda, and I'd only left the place 6 months before, and then I was back twice. But it was interesting down the islands to see the difference. But you had to be careful when you went down the islands, because down the islands they have a carnival. It's like the Brazilian carnival. So if you're trying to install and commission something, everyone takes off and goes to the next island. And when they come back 10 days later, they're not really capable of doing very much work. So a 10-day installation could finish up 3-4 weeks because there were no assistants, no operators, nothing. So it tended to draw out the trips quite a little bit. But then the Middle East was entirely different. And never travelled in that part of the world before. It's quite a shock when you step off the aircraft and you see guys walking about holding hands and that kind of good stuff. But you soon get acclimatised. Yeah. But Yambu and Malta, they were nice jobs. Malta was a nice job to be on, a nice island. And then going to Aqua Design, that they did. I've been to the Marshall Islands, which is an experience, because when the tide comes in, 25% of the airport disappears. So you had to get your flight while you had a low tide. Yeah, or you were stuck there. So other than that, it's been interesting. I've been, I think about travelling 11 countries, and every one was entirely different from the last one. But the units at the time I was travelling, the units worked. You had good product water, and if you got good SDIs, salt density, the plant would work fine. It was just a problem if it's like the military, you need a volunteer to operate the plant, and there were 6 guys. 5 would step back, and there were only 1 guy left, and that's who you had to train up. And I suppose if you're not bilingual and you're in Spanish speaking, it's a little bit difficult, yeah. But we managed. Yeah. So.
I used to work for Hydronautics many years ago, and I'd travel around, and some of the field guys were there, and they were cursing the people back in the office because they'd sent the wrong parts and that kind of thing. Did you have those kinds of experiences?
Oh,
especially with these smoke breaks out back.
Yeah. No, like in the Marshall Islands, I didn't realise the Pacific was as large as it was. And I finished up one of these projects in the Marshall Islands, and we had energy recovery. and connecting the concentrate to the turbine was a stub pipe with a nipple coming off it, I believe it was, and it was 8 inches long, or should have been 8 inches long. So they sent at the 6 inches I had, I didn't have anything else. So I got in touch with the company, and they sent the exact same one as I had. So you go to the local welding shop and you chop up one to make one. So things like that, if you're waiting for parts, and especially if the customer doesn't own the unit, they're paying you for the amount of water that the unit makes. The longer it's down, the less money the company makes. But getting somebody in the office to understand that, it's pretty difficult. And even the time from the Middle East, with a 12 hours time difference, used to call back to Polly, and somebody goes on an early lunch. Yeah. And I mean, you just don't walk into it. At that time, you had to go into a telephone company. You paid for the call, and then you waited till the green light come on, and you would make the call. So if you're living not in a hotel, you're living in a camp, which could be an hour away, and then you finally get a telephone call, and there's nobody there to accept the call. So it's a little bit frustrating from that point of view.
Yeah.
Other than that, it was all straight sailing.
Yeah, I remember we used to have problems, and this was something that the people back in Santa Barbara never did understand, that the only people that use English system of measurement are Americans. And they'd send spare PVC couplings, 2.5 inch, and we needed millimeters, of course. And that got to be so annoying to the folks in the field. How about you, David?
Well, I'm just reminded that Energy Recover had its birthplace in the same place in Bermuda. It was retrofitted first of all.
Taylor
Tool. Julian Taylor, who just recently passed away. I was in touch with him about 4 or 5 years ago. But the Taylor tool was a hydraulic, very similar to Willard Child's unit, if I recall. But as all of those units, seals. And then Bill put one on that was made, if I recall, from 2 old Dow vessels, right?
Yep, 2 seawater vessels, yeah.
Yeah, Dow membrane vessels left over because they were out of business by that time. And that was very similar to the Dwyer, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was basically the same as the Dwyer.
But shorter.
It was just 2 vertical membrane vessels, and it ran for a while. It had discrete valves, timing problems, of course. But that ran for a while, and then I think quite a while, didn't it, Bob?
Yeah, it ran very well. Out of the 2 or the 3, that's when it had the least problems. But it was a case, the material at that time, you always had leaks and little things like that, but everything worked. When it was online, it did a good job.
Now, did Dow used a steel vessel, coated steel vessel?
Yeah, it was that green coating on the
Yeah,
steel
right,
epoxy coating. Eventually, one of the vessels cracked.
Yeah.
But then they wouldn't pay for it, so I took it out.
I told them not to pay for it. They'll give it to us for free.
So we took it out, and it went to Wrightsville Beach.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so there was a test stand there.
Right. That's the old OSW days, or OWRT days.
Yeah, one or the other.
One or the other, yeah.
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 So that was really the first work exchanger operating on seawater RO. So we were ready to market this product, but the cost of the replacement of the membranes was 80% of the cost of the water was membrane replacement, and 20% was electricity. So nobody was really interested in energy recovery until we put one in Paradise Island that was a Pelton wheel.
Oh, yeah.
And then Malta was reverse running Gennard.
Oh, yeah.
So we did push the energy recovery, but Polymetrics after that first go-round never went further on the work exchanger.
Yeah, because you're right, the membrane price was very high, and the electricity price was, even in the islands, I guess, was fairly low.
Just relative to the membranes, it was all membrane.
Yeah, Julian Taylor's, the longest, it was only online, maximum of 24 hours, and then the seals went. And the way it was built, a beautiful piece of equipment built, but very, very difficult to disassemble to put new seals in. In fact, you practically had to destroy it to get the thing apart. And it was only a year later they discovered when they joined the shafts together they used Loctite. And living in Bermuda, Loctite, oh yeah, nobody had heard of Loctite before. So it was a poor guy. I came in one morning and he was lying fast asleep on the boiler house floor. He just didn't want to leave it. He was running, leave it. But unfortunately, it wasn't very successful. But Polymetrics, the Bill's energy recovery worked very well for a long period of time.
So how did you progress from the original Dow design with the shorter vessels to the long Dewey design?
That was well, reliable water. I got back into it because reliable water. Ed Fredkin, the owner, he'd come up with this hydraulic oil pumping system, and we just couldn't get it to work. So I said, and we had contracts to build plants in Cayman and BVI, and so I said, oh, sorry, we're not going to use yours. We'd already built a couple, and there was hydraulic oil everywhere. So I said, no, we're going to put in a regular work exchanger with valves. And we used membrane vessels, 8-inch membrane vessels. And we'd have like 4 in parallel for one side and 4 for the other side. And we had bowl valves. And that worked pretty well. Problems with the vessels got longer as they pressurized and it tended to break the piping. So one of the reasons that then it became DeSalco, and I basically switched to big stainless steel vessels, and they work pretty well because Cayman, they don't have any corrosion because there's no oxygen in the water. So we were building plants with one double work exchanger per train, and it was just most convenient to make them the same length as the membrane vessels because they fitted underneath the spiral membrane vessels. And then one of my engineers came up with an idea of integrating 8 valves into one. We called it the Lynx valve.
The Lynx valve, yes.
And Scott Shumway, and it was a brilliant invention. So it took all the timing out of it. So just one motion, and it did all the different functions. So that's what became the Dweer. And we were installing 1 per train, and then all of a sudden, I mean, David helped me with the initial marketing and stuff, right? And he was basically my sales guy for Dweer when we started up trying to market it as a separate product, and all of a sudden we got an order for 80 of them for Ashkelon. Basically 40 of them running in parallel because it was a pressure center design. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm in Bermuda now. How am I going to manufacture 80 of these units, you know? So that's when we made the deal with Calder for them to do the manufacturing. So they actually built Ashkelon, although it was my contract. I spent a lot of time there. But it worked very well.
That's
still working.
Still working well.
Still working.
Still working well.
Went on to do Tuas and
Tuas was actually the first sale, wasn't it?
yes.
Actual sale.
The first sale, yeah.
But Ashkelon started first.
Mhm.
And then Tuas is still...
It's Tuas, and then they got, I think they got Tuas 2, didn't they?
Yeah.
And then Singapore, sorry, not Singapore, Australia, they got Brisbane and Sydney, and now I think they're doing the other one in Israel,
The Sorek.
Sorek.
Yeah.
So
The plant with the vertical vessels.
Mm-hmm. So there's quite a few of them out there. So that's. I think one of the things that Polymetrics did that was probably, other than introducing Seawater RO, was we really pushed the build, own, operate concept. We essentially did in Yanbu. We had an operations contract for 4 or 5 years. That was a very early plant built in '78 or something. And then Malta, of course, was an operations contract that went on for almost a quarter of a century.
Yeah, that's right.
And then when Chris Miller and them did Aqua Design, they were pushing the build, own, operate. And then when I went into Reliable Water, I was pushing it, and then with DeSalco. So I think we were really the forerunners of build, own, operate for seawater RO. And now it's just the standard way of doing it, of financing these plants.
Hey, you mentioned Reliable Water. Didn't Floyd Miller work for Reliable Water?
Yeah, Floyd did.
Yeah,
he was
did.
like the first president of
Yeah,
Novicia, I believe.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, what happened to Reliable Water?
Couldn't get financed, basically. It was after the market crash of Black Friday or whatever of
Yeah,
'88,
right.
and we just couldn't get financed. But I had found financing in Bermuda, and so that's kind of why I went back to Bermuda.
In the one of the reasons that Polymetrics quit doing work in Florida was because of the slim profit margins that were available, and sometimes negative profit margins. Who were some of your competitors in those days?
Probably Water Services of America.
Bermuda, maybe?
Yeah, Bermuda. Yeah.
Bermuda.
Yeah, that when I became VP Sales and Marketing, that was kind of the market we were going after. We were just getting into the
Because you had
seawater.
Venice already,
We had Venice.
and you had Sarasota.
Yep, and then an early one I think was, I've forgotten the name of it. But yeah, there was Venice. And so I bid a number of those jobs, and we didn't get any of them, which is actually, I think is probably good.
Probably worth mentioning, too, that the first seawater RO in Saudi was a poly unit. 75,000, wasn't it, Bill?
Yeah, something like that.
That's where we spent Christmas of 75, was it, or 76?
76.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a 75,000 gallon a day plant in the Intercontinental Hotel in Dhahran.
No, in
Was that-
Jeddah.
Was it Jeddah?
Jeddah, yeah.
No, it was Dhahran. It was on the coast.
Okay.
That was when it had gone to Jeddah, and then it came back to Polymetrics. It was refurbished, and it went to the Intercontinental Hotel. And a prince owned the hotel, but it was run by the International. And you could see the big desalinization plant. It was only something like 3 miles away, but they would only give them a 4-inch fresh water line to go to the hotel. And so we put the RO unit in. But then the king moves from Riyadh through Dhahran up to the mountains because of the weather. And as soon as the government people stayed in the hotel, all of a sudden they got a new freshwater line coming from the desal plant. And they had, as far as I know, they never ran the RO unit at all. So there was a 75,000 gallon a day just sitting there.
That sounds like a Saudi story.
Bruno would have said that's the best plant. The one that never started.
The ones that never ran, that's right. As an engineering consultant, the same way. My best plants are the ones that never got built.
There was an interesting situation during that period too. And I was over in Bahrain for the last 2.5 years of my poly career, but that's why I was involved with the Ras Al Mashab. But Poly also put in a large brackish plant, I think it was 1 million gallons a day, was it, in Iran. Zahedan. It's from Zahedan you could see the corners where Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran came together. So that kind of locates it geographically. But I went over short flight from Bahrain over there to do the commissioning after our representative there put in an installation. Went over to do the commissioning. They had just forgotten one thing: the power. There was no power to the plant. So it was about a year later that they actually got the power to the plant. By that time, I guess I'd gone back. I made one more trip over there, and Dave Bolin did the commissioning from Poly. And he got out just as all hell broke loose in Iran. I think the man there that came to do the commissioning, or the governor of that province, was one of the first people shot in the revolution. Yeah.
Yeah, some of those places, that you went in the early days, you wouldn't want to go back now.
No, but
Or
some are
maybe you
better.
would.
Some are a lot better too.
Yeah.
Maybe you would.
Some are a lot better, I think.
Well, the religious people and police in Saudi, we had them come through that 75,000 gallon a day plant, and they were under the impression that the RO unit wasn't making water, it was making vodka. So I had to convince these police officers, and I finished up they scrawled in Arabic, no, water. And I didn't realise what they were doing. So, of course, I said, I'm defacing my company's property, and I was trying to erase this. And the guy said, oh, no, leave it, because that's telling anyone that comes in it's making water, not vodka.
Okay. Well, we had a problem when we would ship membranes in. I remember we had a large shipment in there, and they were preserved in formaldehyde. And formaldehyde is an alcohol. I mean, you look it up in the dictionary, it's an alcohol, right? So the shipments would get seized, and it'd be very difficult to get them cleared.
We had one project that I think it was in Dhahran, the airport. Hydronautics had built a plant, and they shipped out a swab for the vessels so we could clean the vessels. Well, somebody in Santa Barbara described it on the bill of lading as a pig. And it never got through customs. It's somewhere, to this day, I'm sure it's in the recesses of the airport there. It never got through. Could not convince them that, that probably if it was a pig, it would be dead by now and it would be smelly. Didn't make any difference. It said pig, that's what it was. You worked a lot in the early days with DuPont and some with Dow. What other membranes did you use in your projects?
The Polymetrics, basically it was all DuPont, because there was huge pressure from DuPont to be a loyal licensee, but then we dabbled in Dow. I think trying to keep DuPont honest, but I'm not sure it did. DuPont had a lot of pressure.
Well, prior
So
to that,
we basically, I never used a spiral membrane until reliable water.
well, they started out with Rogas, of course. The origins of poly. In fact, let's see, they became a licensee of DuPont. Would have to be 71, 70, about 1972. But up until that, they were Roga was the only membrane. Period.
Well, that's when Dave first started the company, and they were really concentrating on ultra pure water.
Right, they were
Rinse water.
making equipment for aqua media.
Right.
They were, yeah, and actually, it was the microcircuit industry that really launched RO. Period. Yeah. It was the chip business. In Silicon Valley, everybody had one. Yeah.
But then Polymetrics sort of went away from those early days and really got out of the ultra pure water business.
I think
or did
because
you still do some?
No, I think it was because Aqua Media started to make their own equipment. So Polymetrics lost their market, but later on they got into you worked for them for a while, right? The ultra pure side.
Ionics. I worked for Ionics for a while. That was purely ultra pure water for washing chips.
No, but Polymetrics had a ultra pure water division, and they had the trucks with the DI on them, and then it was mostly the portable side.
And that went on for some time.
Yes, and then it was sold to, I guess, U.S. Filter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the Polymetrics units are still, when I was with Ionics, they're still in operation. The polygreen control panels are still operating, still in line. And that's been a number of years.
Well, what's Malta now? 30 years?
Has Malta, did Malta ever switch from the B10s to spirals?
They're actually still running some of the original B10s.
Are they really?
They are.
I'll be darned.
And they're 30 years old.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I think there were 10 racks, wasn't it? 10 racks, all B10s.
And then we added 2 more and became 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, last time I was there, they'd be 25 years old, same membranes.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
That's really a testament to to DuPont.
Yeah, mind you, I think we replaced them 2 times in the first 3 years.
Yeah.
There was serious problems at the beginning.
When I first moved to Florida in 1977, there's a little trailer park up near Venice called Spanish Lakes, and there was a small polymetrics unit in there. I think 3 B9 permeators, and they had serious problems with oxidized hydrogen sulfide. And that was, in the early days, that was an issue in Florida everywhere until people learned not to. Did you run into that in Sarasota at all, in Venice, the big Venice plant? That problem?
I don't recall Venice having hydrogen sulfide, although I wasn't very involved in it.
All right, it has hydrogen sulfide.
Well, Cayman, of course, we had a lot of hydrogen sulfide and just made sure you didn't get any oxygen in the water and
Right.
just went right through the system.
But I remember your proposal to Sanibel. You were, and I think you had down membranes in that.
Mm-hmm.
So you needed acid, but you lowered the pH to 4 in the feed water, which I thought, I didn't know much at those days, but I thought that was a bit excessive.
Well, you'll have to ask Mike Nelson about that one. He was process manager.
What's you looking back on your careers with Polymetrics? What was the best project from your perspective that you worked on?
Oh, I think it has to be Malta.
Yeah, I would, by all means, yeah, by far. It was a panic-stricken type installation, but correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, I believe we broke ground in March. We made water on New Year's Eve. Is that right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
And poor old David here, he was in charge of building a highly brackish plant called Marsa.
Marsa.
And so we were building the main Arlopsy plant and this Marsa plant up near the dockyards, dry docks, I should say. And David was definitely the poor sister, right? So I mean, he didn't get engineering drawings. He just basically got a bunch of equipment and built it yourself, right?
I kind of say I built it out of the spare parts left over from the big one. Arlopsy, yeah. That was, but it was a fun project. It was one of those situations. I always use it as an example where your engineers should be privy to the contract, because that entire plant, every bit of it that could possibly be built out of limestone was built out of limestone. The plinths, the everything. I mean, literally, it was 5 levels on 2 stories, and if it could be built of limestone, including like the well, the degasifier blowers, everything. I mean, it was fun. It was fun, but it didn't have the penalties associated with the same as Arlopsy. Arlopsy had serious penalties associated, and they never paid any penalties. But it got the attention, especially up front, of course, and so I was privileged to work on both of them.
How big was the brackish water plant?
It was pretty big. It was
2.5 million, was it?
Yeah, it was 6,000 cubic meters a day. It was a good size.
Yeah, it was a single train, but it was 3 stages, wasn't it? Yeah, 3 stages. It was highly bright. It turned out to be about 20,000. I think it was built with a 20,000 ppm, and it turned out to be more like 13,000. But the stages could be valved, so you could actually select any number of inter-stages. Like it'd be like a 3-2-1 or that kind of array. You could tailor it to the situation. It was a fun plant. DuPont made a big ballyhoo out of it because of the architecture, actually.
And that was all B9s?
No, B10s.
That was B10s?
B10s,
okay.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the other people that were there that maybe are lesser known but were contributors and important people in the organization?
Walt Hayden, the electrical engineer, did a tremendous amount of work at Polymetrics and Aqua Design. I did a lot of work for Walt Design, and fantastic chap to work for.
But he's actually one of the ones being interviewed.
Yeah, we're
right?
interviewing him later on.
I doubt with that, I don't know.
Now, how many people were there at the peak?
Probably, well, say in 1980 it was probably 40 or 50. But then when they started having that ultra pure division, there was quite a big increase. But probably in the real heyday, it was 40 or 50 people.
On Corvin Drive, I think maybe 40, was it, Max, on Corvin Drive?
And I'm trying to think who else.
The most outstanding personality that I recall was Pat Sullivan, who was the chairman, or the president, I guess they called him, at the time. Pat was brought in by Stearns, right?
Yeah, Harry.
Yeah,
Stearns.
Harry Stearns. And he was a character. Didn't last that long, though, and followed up by...
When was that?
That would be 1973 when I first joined.
Mhm.
He was about my size and a little wider, always chomping on a cigar.
Yeah, we went through a lot of presidents because then it was Jack Whiteley,
That's right, yeah.
and then Terry DePee, who sort of was the one who pushed the seawater side of it, I think. And then then
And Austin,
Paul Knopf,
Austin Morris, I
Paul
remember.
Knopf, Austin Morris, Steve Maynard. Those were sort of my presidents.
Why was there such a big turnover in the presidents?
I think the company was growing quite quickly, and maybe the shareholder wasn't that happy. I'm not sure. Well, in the case of Terry DePee, he went and worked started up a Matito operation because Polymetrics was private labeling for the Gondors, Matito, and when the Lebanese Civil War started, they couldn't make RO in Lebanon anymore, so Polymetrics was private labeling. And then when Polymetrics was purchased by TAG, watch people now, basically the TAG didn't want the Gondor Matito group anymore. So Terry and Doug went and formed a manufacturing operation in Houston, I think. Right?
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
right, in Houston.
That's right. And then Larry Mayfield took that over and brought me from Singapore to work with him in Houston. 6 months later, the Gondors said, lay 50% off. Just like that. So we did. And
So it was 50% of 2 people?
no, we had, no, there was at least 30 people at that time. Yeah. Yeah. Dave Bolin worked at that time. He was let go. We just averaged had to slice 50%, and then Larry himself wound up out there. I don't remember why. I was the de facto head of the company, doing very, very little, and I lasted about another month before it completely collapsed. Then, I'm not sure exactly what happened to that manufacturing division, frankly. Seemed like I heard that they infiltrated or brought back foreign Arabs, basically, to operate it. But I don't know if it actually did anything after that.
But Terry and Doug went in to form Sea Treat, the offshore.
Yeah.
They were doing offshore RO. Oh, that reminds me of a story. Sorry. We built these standardized 25,000 gallon a day seawater plants, and we were trying to get into the offshore oil industry, and we got 2 of them on a very large rig in the North Sea. And of course, our competition was the Aquachem vapor compressors, and they had a winter storm. There were 450 people it was 2 rigs, like an accommodations rig and a working rig. They had a winter storm that went on for 2 months. And the 2 RO plants we had broke down quite shortly into the storm. And they were in dire trouble because there was no water.
You couldn't get there.
Nope, 30-foot waves and stuff. And so that was the end of RO in the North Sea for 15 years. It was just totally blackballed.
You went from being a relatively small company to a fairly significant company with projects all over the world. How did you accomplish the management of that and people that you had, the outliers that you were dealing with and that sort of thing?
Well, we were equipment suppliers for the most part, right? So we sent out service people and installation people and just, so it was all very temporary. We didn't tend to have offices other than Dave's office in Saudi, right?
In Bahrain, yeah,
Yeah.
which was basically a telex station.
So you really handled everything from here,
Yes.
and all of the, and the same is true when you were doing the operating contracts, or did you have local? You must have had local people there.
Malta, we had a substantial number of people. There were probably 40 or 50 people working in Malta, and we had management there. But I mean, I was general manager of that, of the international division. So I was based in California. Right. Mike Lamandola and I and Carol Abella, and we sort of ran Malta out of California. Yeah. I think because we preferred to live in California.
Malta's a nice place.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Well, Tim Clark, of course, was one of the founders of Poly, who, along with Gruno and I can't remember the other people, but Tim and Dave Gruno remained with the company, and Tim ran Malta. He was like the resident. He actually married a Maltese. He's still there. Actually, I hear he's quite sick.
Oh, that's too bad. So, as the technology moved forward and became more and more popular, to use an overused word, what did you do within Polymetrics, technically, to maintain your competitive position?
We basically didn't maintain our competitive position. I mean, well, what happened was, everybody and his brother was then making seawater RO by 1985, and we'd been purchased by Compagnie Générale des Eaux, which is now Veolia, and I was in charge of the international division, and we basically stopped bidding. We just looked after Malta.
Is that right?
That's why I left. Because there was nothing to do. Malta was a very successful contract, but you have to have in this world an unfair competitive advantage in the desalination business, and we didn't have one. We had one initially, but and then I had one with Desalco in the Caribbean with my work exchangers.
Right. So are you? David, I know that you're still actively involved in the business.
Yes.
And living happily in Beijing.
Mm.
How long are you going to be there?
6 months maximum. That's
6 months max?
That's my contract.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Up until I've been with Aqualink
like
for
Chinese food?
I do, actually.
Oh, good.
Yeah, if you can find anything decent in Beijing. Fortunately, there's lots of ethnic restaurants. But no, I've been with Aqualink for 6 years now, and 2 years I was based in Dubai, and then almost 4 years basically part-time as a consultant, and just recently got called up to fill in full-time for our departed CTO. So yeah, it's an interim, and in fact, if I can find a replacement, anybody interested? I can. That's my exit from Beijing is to find a replacement.
So, Bob, you said you were a gentleman of leisure?
Yes,
And do as little as possible for as long as possible?
Yes. I'm a deep thinker. I think a lot, but I don't accomplish very much.
You think about what you're going to do next.
Yes, and that's about it. No, it's really nice to be in that position, but
Don't miss any of the excitement of being in foreign places. And
no, I've had enough. When you've been through 11 different countries and travelled so much, airline food gets rather bland.
yeah, it does.
To the
It's
very-
getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and the luxury of flying is long gone. So now I just do a little bit here and there, and that's it. But it was nice to finally retire, because you do, after a good number of years, you get fed up travelling. I mean, now I do a bit of travelling. I take my wife with me because she would never believe where I'd been. So now I take her to places that I have been to show her, to prove that I wasn't somewhere else.
What a tough time you were really
Yeah.
having there. And you were going on a beach someplace with
Yeah, I
a
don't
bunch
show her
of
the
girls.
beaches. I just show her the back of town. That's about
Bill,
it.
you're pretty much retired now. Are
Yeah,
you
I
still
am.
doing something?
No, yeah, I'm pretty much retired. I do a lot of sailing, and got grandchildren now, which is terrific. And I have a few ideas I'm dabbling with, a couple to do with water, and then I'm sort of into cosmology, the origin of the universe, because of my physics background. So I've always had some ideas about that. So I dabble in that.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about that. Having gone to Oxford and gotten a doctorate in atomic physics, you go back to Bermuda and run electrodialysis plants. That seems like a kind of strange profession.
Well,
for an atomic physicist.
well, we'd never had a lot of direction in those days as to what degree you did. So I did physics, and Bermuda has one Rhodes Scholarship per year. India has 4. So the odds of getting a Rhodes Scholarship in Bermuda are pretty good. And it gave me an excuse not to have to go out and find a living for 3 years, right? So that was really why I did the doctorate. And then at that time, in 72, England was incredibly depressed. Coal strikes and garbage strikes, gas strikes, and the unions ran the country.
Yeah, that's right.
And we were in Oxford, and the job I got offered were 20% of the salary that the car assemblers were getting. And so I said, I'm just not going to stay here. So. And there wasn't much technical in Bermuda, so
There wasn't much physics to be done in Bermuda.
No. So, but physics is wonderful because you understand
Oh, sure.
all kinds of things. So it's been a huge value to me over the years because basically the engineers can't con me.
So, looking back on your career, do you ever regret going into the water business and specifically the RO business?
Oh, no, absolutely. It was the greatest career ever. I just had an absolutely fabulous time.
Yeah.
Absolutely fabulous.
Now, David, you were in the Canadian Navy,
That's correct, yes.
and what did you do there?
Aircraft, basically an aircraft mechanic, but you took a I took a 4-year course. Basically, they turn you out with a pretty good basic knowledge of engineering, which kind of qualified me at the time when I arrived in Santa Barbara from Halifax, Nova Scotia. I actually went there to complete my education, and there was just so much opportunity. It was amazing, and so I don't know. I just saw this ad in the paper for an RO engineer. I mean, in 1969, there probably were only 10 people in the whole world engaged in RO, and they were coming out of Mother Gulf. We always called it Mother Gulf because they were the Roga division, which actually had its origins with General Dynamics.
Yeah, right.
So and this Blair Gibbons, he got Maximilian Franz Breitling to put up the money, and when Blair got tired of sweeping the floors, he hired me. That was basically how I got into it.
So having learned to spell RO,
Yes.
have you ever regretted
Oh,
answering that ad?
absolutely not. Matter of fact, yeah, no, it was. It's been a wonderful trip. I mean, it's just been just one pretty well good happening after the other. Certainly don't regret it. Would have been nice to finish my education, but we need it now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Bob, how about you?
Well,
I mean, you started off in refrigeration engineering and
then I went on to general engineering.
yeah.
This gentleman here got me into the United States through working in the first RO unit, and it was over a 5-year period, and we came to California, and then that's just been at the right place at the right time.
You've enjoyed being in the water business
Oh
more
yeah,
than
it's been very interesting
Yeah.
because it keeps developing all the time. And then I was working at Aqua Design when we did Morro Bay, and that's when we discovered that if you work in California, you need a license. And I was operating the plant there for a period of time. So I finished taking a correspondence course through SAC University to get a license, which I did. It was rather late in life getting a license, where I'd been
you
all
still
over the
is
world.
it still active?
No, I just let it go.
Oh, that's too bad. There's a big shortage of licensed operators in the state of California.
I thought there would be, but I wasn't really interested. I just needed one for that Morro Bay, and that was it.
Ian, I was just reminded that that unit that Dave Gruno sold to BAS, British Aviation Services, DuPont did not have a membrane that had actually run on seawater at that time, but they were telling us that they had seawater membrane. On the basis of that, Dave Gruno said, "I've sold one," and when we really kludged together what we thought would be suitable materials, sent the unit to Bermuda. Bob installed it, and the membranes came like following after, and it was the first time that a DuPont had seen seawater. And then you remember we ran it for about an hour and thought, well, we better check, and we shut it off, and we said, "What's that great hissing sound?" We discovered suckback. Yeah, all the permeate tubes collapsed. It was suckback had been discovered.
There you see, that's
Yeah.
If you hadn't dealt with seawater, and I guess you weren't. Well, you should have known. You're a physicist. You should have known about
right.
osmotic pressure.
Yeah, I should have.
and osmosis. You should have known about that.
A lot of the pre-filtration, a lot of it wasn't. The DE filters didn't work very well, and even in other units I worked on, they were just a waste of time. Finished up with a 1 micron polypropylene filter, which turned out to be the best filter. If you had a good well and 1 micron filters, your unit would run very well. It's when you went to the open sea intake you had problems.
But that one was actually open sea.
Yeah, we finished up. But it started off, I had a well just 10 feet away from the RO unit. But what I found out, all the land round the airport was all filled with Americans during the Second World War to build the runway. And it was hydrogen sulfide in it, so that's when we had to go across and take an open sea intake. But it was a good, it was in a lagoon. No, it wasn't so much a lagoon, but it was pretty sheltered, so it wasn't a lot of sand being stirred up. So it worked pretty well.
Yeah, pretty low turbidity water.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was good feed water.
It's funny you should mention that about DE, because that was part of the fix for the Tampa Bay water plant.
Really?
They put in, Accione put in big DE filter system.
I guess if you control it all right, but this was just a swimming pool filter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it didn't work. And the pumps were resist. After about three months, these pumps aren't working well. Let's take them apart. And we took them apart, and all the pieces of the impellers all fell out.
Well, that's right, because the original vertical turbine pumps in Cape Coral, the Permuted plant, they were resist, and they didn't, even in brackish water, they didn't last very long.
We finished up with the plunger with a ceramic piston, and that worked very well. And the valves, silk and disc with aluminum. bronze or stainless steel stood up reasonably well too, and were easy to repair. The Wheatley pump you could change the valves all in one day. You could draw the pistons out. That was one of the easiest pumps to work on.
Did you have problems with vibration with those pumps?
Not really, because we had a high pressure pulsation damper.
Mm-hmm.
Greers, I think it was. We didn't have anything in the suction side, just on the discharge side.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem to have any problem.
Yeah, they're quintuplex, all, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're pretty smooth.
Yeah, the other ones we had was Wasco, and that's where we get the spikes. And that was a triplex pump.
FMC, no?
Yeah, FMC
FMC,
and the Wasco. I think it was at one time. It didn't last too long.
Yeah.
The problem with that, I was mentioned yesterday, they had a glycerine lubrication system. It was set above the plungers, above the fluid end, and it was driven off the main shaft. But trying to get glycerine in Bermuda, I was going around the pharmacies buying up half-pint bottles of glycerine to keep this thing going. You could see it drip, 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 drip before I finally get 4 gallons at a time brought in. There was nothing left in the island, so I had to shut the plant down. So that was a big disadvantage.
Yeah. Do you have any final reminiscences you'd like to share with us?
No, I think I just really appreciate the opportunity to do this, and it's
We're glad
been
you're
a
here.
fabulous time we've had.
Bob?
Yeah, it's no names are coming up that I completely forgot about, and then I can remember the names, but I can't remember the faces. So that's been quite an eventful morning in itself, just reminiscing about different people you've come across in your travels and work. So that was good.
Good. David?
Well,
Any last thoughts?
Yeah, it's a shame that we've aged over 35 years. It's all except Bill. I mean, it's not fair. Really not fair. But no,
He hasn't changed much, has he?
No. It's been a great ride, and Polly, it's very nice to have been associated with Polly, because they truly were the pioneers in this business. I mean, they were successful, whereas I can think of a lot of companies, big name companies. Can I mention them?
Yes.
Yeah, well, Bermuda and Culligan. I mean, they're big names, and they did not make it in the RO business. They bombed. But Polly, I mean, it's like everywhere. I guess the executives exist to get swallowed up. That's the whole name of the game, I guess. Shame, but it was a great company and a good camaraderie. I mean, good, really fun, a lot of people to work with.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here, and it's been enjoyable. And nice to meet you, Bob. I've known these other two characters for a while. So once again, thanks very much, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Right.